Welcome back, History Hounds and Happy Campers. I'm Amanda, and today we're taking you to a place that defines the word remote. There are national parks you visit for the scenery, like Yosemite National Park. There are sites you visit for the architecture, like the intricate cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde. And then there are the places you visit because the very ground vibrates with history. Places where the silence is so heavy it feels like it's holding its breath, waiting to tell you what happened there. Fort Bowie National Historic Site in southeastern Arizona is one of those places. It is not easy to get to. You don't just stumble upon Fort Bowie on your way to get coffee. It requires intention. It requires navigating dirt roads that rattle your teeth, and uniquely for a National Park Service unit, it requires a hike just to get to the front door. Today we're taking you on that journey. We're going to hike that mile-and-a-half dusty trail to the heart of Apache Pass, explore the melting adobe ruins of a post that was once the nerve center of the U.S. Army's war against the Chiricahua Apache. And then we're going to white-knuckle drive the infamous Apache Pass Road out. This is ground zero for some of the most complex, tragic, and pivotal moments in the American West. A place where legends like Cochise, Geronimo, General Crook, and a young, disastrous lieutenant named George Bascom collided. So lace up your hiking boots, fill your water camelback. Seriously, fill it. It's dry out here. And let's walk into history. To understand Fort Bowie, you have to understand the geography. We're in the high desert of southeast Arizona, a landscape defined by the Sky Islands, massive mountain ranges that rise abruptly from the flat desert floor. Separating two of these ranges, the Dos Cabezas Mountains to the north and the formidable Chiricahua Mountains to the south, in a narrow saddle of land called Apache Pass. For centuries, if you wanted to move east or west through this territory, you went through Apache Pass. Why? Because in this unforgiving, arid landscape, Apache Pass held treasure. Apache Spring, a reliable year-round source of fresh water. Whoever controlled that water controlled movement in the Southwest. For generations, that control belonged to the Chiricahua Apaches. When we arrived at the trailhead, it was early morning. The sun was already bright, illuminating the Octalio cactus that looked like stick figures with the flaming red hair. We parked the truck at the designated trailhead parking lot. You cannot drive to Fort Bowie unless you have specific ADA requirements and prearranged access. For everyone else, history is earned with sweat. We loaded up our packs. The sign of the trailhead read Fort Bowie, 1.5 miles. Doesn't sound like much, but in the exposed sun, it's a commitment. As we started walking, the modern world just fell away. The trail winds through the mesquite and yucca. It's quiet. You're walking the exact same route that stagecoaches, cavalry columns, and Apache warriors trod for centuries. The trail is 1.5 miles, one direction, to the fort ruins, visitor center, and park store. The National Park Service website recommends that you plan to spend at least 2 hours to visit the site. Bathrooms and a hydration station greet you at the visitor center, along with a wraparound porch with plenty of rocking chairs to rest and take in the view of the fort. The trail was well marked, did not have much elevation gain, and was pet friendly. Make sure you leave no trace and pack in what you pack out. Make sure to check the visitor center hours, as we visited during the government shutdown, and unfortunately, the visitor center was closed. They did have a box on the table by the door that contained the passport stamp if you're collecting those like I am. So about a third of a mile in, we came to our first stop, the ruins of an old 1800s mining cabin. The informational plaque read that the cabin once belonged to a miner named Jesse L. Millsap. Not much is left of the cabin today. With a little research, we learned that Jesse L. Millsap was killed in a dynamite explosion while digging a well. The next stop that we came to was the ruins of the Butterfield Overland Mail Stage Station. In the late 1850s, there was a crucial stop on the 2,800-mile mail route from St. Louis to San Francisco. Passengers, exhausted and choked with dust, would stop here for water and a brief rest, terrified the whole time because they knew they were deep in Apache territory. It was right here, near this stage station, in February 1861, that an event happened that changed the course of Western history. It is known as the Bascom Affair. At that time, the relationship between the Chiricahua Apache chief Cochise and a few Americans in the area was actually relatively peaceful. They traded, they coexisted tentatively.
Then, a rancher's son was kidnapped by a raiding party from a different Apache band. But the Army sent a young, inexperienced, and frankly arrogant lieutenant named George Bascom to recover the boy. Bascom arrived in Apache Pass and invited Cochise to his tent for a parley, a talk. Cochise, not knowing about the kidnapping and trusting the parley process, brought his family, including his wife and young son.
Once inside the tent, Bascom accused Cochise of the kidnapping. Cochise truthfully denied it. Bascom then announced that Cochise and his family would be held hostage until the boy was returned. It was a massive betrayal of trust. Cochise, furious, pulled a knife, slashed open the side of the army canvas tent, and escaped in a hail of bullets. Though he was wounded, his family, however, was captured. What followed over the next few days was a tragic spiral of retaliatory hostage-taking and executions on both sides. The peace was shattered. Cochise, previously open to the coexistence, declared war. The Bascom Affair ignited conflicts that would rage across the Southwest for the next 25 years.
Standing there by the crumbling stone foundations of the stage station, looking up at the rocky hillsides that surround the pass, you can almost feel the tension of those few days in 1861. The moment a mistake became a war.
As you leave the stage station ruins and continue deeper into the pass, the trail starts to feel a little more intimate. You're moving away from the highway of the 1860s and into the actual lived-in history of the canyon. About a half-mile in, we came across a site that really stops you in your tracks. It's the Fort Bowie Post Cemetery.
Now when you think of military cemeteries, you might think of the vast, rolling green hills of Arlington with thousands of identical stones. But this is different. This is a small, fenced-in plot of desert. There are about 20 or 30 white headstones standing in the red dirt, surrounded by a simple brown picket fence. When we walked up to the fence, the first thing I noticed was the diversity of the names. It wasn't just soldiers who died in the battle. You see headstones for civilian stagecoach drivers who were ambushed in the pass. You see markers for the young children of officers who succumbed to the harsh conditions and diseased in this remote outpost. He was the young son of a Chiricahua Apache chief. He died here at the fort while being held as a hostage, or some say prisoner. Seeing his name there among the soldiers, he was taught to fear. It is a gut punch. It reminds you that in a war this long and this bitter, the front line often ran through the hearts of families. Most of the soldiers were eventually moved to San Francisco's Presidio, but many of the civilians and Apaches remain here, guarded by the desert.
Just a short distance from the cemetery, the trail takes you past a small, unassuming pile of stones and melting adobe. This is the site of the Chiricahua Indian Agency. This spot represents a very specific, hopeful, yet ultimately tragic window in time, roughly between 1872 and 1876. After years of brutal fighting, a general named Oliver Otis Howard, known as the Christian General, actually managed to sit down with Cochise and negotiate a peace. They established a reservation right here in the Chiricahua Mountains, and this agency was the hub. It was where the government was supposed to distribute rations and where the Apaches were expected to transition into a new way of life. For a few years, it actually worked. There was a tentative peace. But when Cochise died in 1874, the government decided that the reservation was too valuable and too close to the Mexican border. They tried to move the Chiricahuas to San Carlos, a place Muir would have called a hellhole. Many refused, Geronimo among them, and the wars ignited all over again. Looking at those few foundation stones today, you realize you're looking at a what-if of American history. What if that peace had held? Where are you at, Mom?
We are on a hike, heading to Fort Bowie Visitor Center, stopping at the Butterfield Stage, and this one is
The Chiricahua Apache Indian agents.
right near the agency ruins. The Park Service has placed a reproduction of a Chiricahua wickiup. Now, if you grew up watching old westerns, you probably pictured Apaches living in a buffalo skin teepees like the tribes of the Great Plains, but the Chiricahuas were masters of the desert. They lived in wickiups, dome-shaped structures made from a frame of willow or oak poles, thatched with bear grass or yucca. Standing next to the reproduction, I was struck by how perfectly it blended into the landscape. It wasn't designed to dominate the environment like the stone and adobe fort on the hill. It was designed to be a part of it. It was mobile, breathable, and surprisingly sturdy. When we were there, Lua, our Great Pyrenees scout, was sniffing around the base of the structure. I think you can tell, even with the reproduction, that this was a place designed for watching and waiting. The Apaches would sit in the shade of these structures and look out over the pass, seeing every moment, every dust cloud from miles away. It's a powerful contrast. On one side of the trail, you have the agency, the crumbling attempt at management. On the other side, the wickiup, the symbol of a nomadic, fierce culture that had called these sky islands home for centuries.
As the trail starts to climb toward the spring, you realize you just walked through 3 different versions of the West in under a mile. The stage station of the pioneers, the cemetery of the fallen, and the agency of a failed peace. And all of them, every single one, was drawn here for the same reason: the water. Let's head to the spring. We continue down the trail. The path dips lower into a wash, and the vegetation grows a little denser, a little greener. You smell the moisture in the air before you see it. Apache Spring. It doesn't look like much today, a small protected seep trickling out of the hillside, but this meager flow is the entire reason for the bloodshed here. A year after the Bascom Affair, during the Civil War, a column of California volunteers marching east to fight the Confederates needed this water. Cochise and another legendary chief, Magnus Coloradus, set an ambush in the pass with 500 warriors. The Battle of Apache Pass in July 1862 was fierce. The Apaches held the high ground, raining fire down on the soldiers desperate for a drink. The only thing that saved the army was technology. They deployed mountain howitzers, small cannons, and fired exploding shells into the rock cliffs where the Apache were hidden. The Apaches had never encountered canyon fire before. It terrified them, and they retreated.
The army got their water, but the commander realized that if they wanted to keep this route open, they couldn't just pass through. They had to stay. Just weeks after the battle, the first Fort Bowie was established on a hill overlooking the spring.
The last quarter mile of the hike is an uphill slog. You're hot, you're dusty, you're in the sun, and your legs are feeling it. And then you crest a small rise, and there it is. The American flag snapping in the wind is usually the first thing you see. A starch patch of red, white, and blue against the endless brown and ochre landscape. Then the ruins spread out before you. Fort Bowie isn't a restored fort like you might see in the movies. There's no pristine wooden barracks standing tall. These are arrested ruins. The National Park Service maintains them in their current state of decay, preventing them from melting away entirely back into the earth, but not rebuilding them. The adobe walls stand 4 or 5 feet high, worn smooth by a century of wind and rain. Stone foundations outline where sprawling storehouses, officers' quarters, and the hospital once stood.
Resting on the visitor center patio in rocking chairs and wandering among the ruins is a haunting experience. It's so incredibly quiet now.
You walk past the outlines of the massive barracks and try to imagine the noise. At its height in the 1880s, this second, larger fort was a bustling community of over 300 people. Soldiers, wives, children, civilian contractors. There was a post-trader store, a school, and a billiards hall. It was a base of operations for General George Crook and later General Nelson Miles during their final campaigns to capture Geronimo. Troops would ride out of here for months at a time, hunting the elusive Chiricahua bands through the rugged mountains of Mexico and Arizona. It all ended here in 1886 when Geronimo finally surrendered for the last time. He and his remaining followers were brought to Fort Bowie before being loaded into wagons and shipped by train to their imprisonment in Florida, Alabama, and eventually Oklahoma. The war was over. The fort's purpose evaporated almost overnight. By 1894, the Army abandoned the post. They pulled down the roofs for lumber, sold off the fixtures, and left the adobe walls to the mercy of the desert monsoon rains.
Standing in the middle of the parade grounds, I close my eyes. You try to feel the presence of the Buffalo soldiers who served here, the anxiety of the officers' wives watching patrols ride out, not knowing who would come back, the despair of the Apache prisoners brought here, watching their homeland disappear behind them forever. It's all soaked into this dirt.
After spending a few hours soaking in the site, we hiked the mile and a half back to the rig, but we decided we weren't going to leave the easy way on the paved road to the north. We wanted to complete the experience. We wanted to drive out via the old Butterfield stage route through Apache Pass itself. Now, a word of caution to our fellow happy campers: do not attempt this drive in a low clearance sedan. Do not attempt this if it's been raining heavily. This is a primitive, unpaved BLM in county road. We put the truck in four-wheel drive just in case and turn south. The road immediately gets rough. It's narrow, twisting, and full of washboards that rattle your very soul. It drops down into the steep washes and climbs back out onto loose shale. Driving this route, even in a modern vehicle with air conditioning and suspension, gave us a profound respect for the stagecoach drivers and passengers of the 1860s.
Imagine doing this road in a wooden coach with steel-rimmed wheels. No suspension, choked by dust, with the constant, terrifying knowledge that behind any one of these hundreds of boulders lining the road, an ambush could be waiting. The driver takes you right through the heart of the pass, past the towering rock formations where the 1962 battle took place. It's incredibly scenic, rugged, and raw. It feels untamed. It took us nearly an hour to navigate the 12 or so miles out the south side until we finally hit pavement near a tiny town of Bowie. When the tires finally hit smooth asphalt, we both let out a breath that we didn't know we were holding.
Fort Bowie National Historic Site is not a casual stop. It demands effort. It demands that you walk in the footsteps of the people who made history here, both terrible and heroic. It's important because it preserves a difficult truth. It doesn't glorify the Army, and it doesn't overly romanticize the Apache. It just presents the raw reality of violent clash of cultures that define the American West. When you stand at those melting adobe walls, surrounded by the intense silence of the Chiricahuas, you understand that history isn't just something in a textbook. It happened on the ground, near a trickle of water, where the choices were made that we are still living with today. If you're ever in Southeast Arizona and you have time and the hiking boots, make the journey. It's a haunt you won't forget. Until next time, keep your noses to the history tale and happy camping.
So from History Hounds and Happy Campers, until we see you next time, please, if you got value out of this video, please hit the like button and subscribe. It would help us out tremendously. Thanks again. See you soon.